Welcome back. This is part 6 of Chronicles of Alex, and it may well be the conclusive part. I may or may not do another episode in the future if I find that there are enough stories that I've kind of forgotten to mention and then I decide to collate them, in which case they'll be kind of higgledy-piggledy ones like in episodes 3 and 4. But this one takes place, much like the last episode, takes place over a long weekend. This time in London. Now, Alex's living situation in London was outlandish. really outlandish. It's the kind of stuff that, like, you watch TV shows about because you wouldn't want to live that way yourself. So this would have been in about the summer of 2008. So Alex would have been 19, and by this point he had already fallen into a bit of a drug habit. As far as I know, he was doing all right with work. I don't actually know exactly what he was doing in London. I don't think he yet had a job in electrical stores that he would sort of consistently have later on, but I do know that he was doing a bit of web design for some people. He was doing some sort of freelance IT stuff, and he told me that he was charging people through the nose for it. He was finding people who didn't know better and he was fleecing them. That's what he told me. There's a lot of this story today that is going to be that's what he told me, including his living situation. So I knew that he was kind of involved with drugs around this time, and I feel like London may have been the place for him where that all kind of started. But he was living in a flat with a woman, not his girlfriend, but we'll come to that in a bit, that was just outside of central London, which has very extortionate rent. For anyone who's ever lived anywhere near London will know. So I don't know how far true it was that he was managing to fleece people, but he was paying for this flat somehow. Now, about the living situation of the flat itself. Technically, the flat was leased out, again, all according to Alex. Technically, the flat was leased out in this other guy's name, and he was subletting the place to this woman and to Alex. And he had a kind of symbiotic relationship with the both of them. She, according to Alex, was a prostitute, and he was her pimp. Not Alex, this guy who owned the flat, or was subletting the flat, was the pimp of his girlfriend, the prostitute. I think her name was like Estrella or something. That's the only one. The only name that I actually remember. I think he would have told me the other guy's name, but it's gone now. And Alex was also buying drugs off of this guy. So the guy who's subletting the flat is both the girlfriend and the pimp of the woman in the flat and the drug dealer of the guy in the flat. Now, I get invited up there, and not long after I arrive, Alex tells me this whole ordeal that has just happened sort of like a week earlier, and I think he may have been calling on me to sort of help him with getting some of his stuff out the flat. I can't remember if I ended up taking anything for him, like to his parents or whatever, but I know he was in a hurry to get out of the flat. And the reason why is because this guy walked into his flat, the subletting guy, drug dealer, pimp guy, walked into his flat and went to his girlfriend's bedroom and found her and Alex in bed together. He went ballistic and started smashing the place up. He grabbed Alex's lava lamp, which Alex told me cost him a bit of money, and money was something that he was finding very hard to keep hold of. He grabbed Alex's lava lamp and chucked it out the window, and it smashed on the street. At which point Alex, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, skinny as a rake and probably not very good in a fight, decides to tackle this guy. Alex gets hit like one time all according to Alex, so this part makes it kind of believable. He gets hit one time and goes down. He then says to Alex, "You've got a week to pack your stuff and get out of here." Now, from what I remember, this happened more than a week before I arrived. And Alex takes me into his flat and he says, right, basically no one's home at the moment, but in the morning you've got to be really quiet because, and then he tells me this whole story and then says, Estrella knows I'm living here, but I have kind of like pretended to not be living here for the last couple of weeks. Already, this is getting off to a great start. We go into his flat. It looks like a nice place. It's kind of dark, like none of the lights get turned on apart from in Alex's room and in the hallway. And from there, I sort of set my stuff down because I'm planning on staying a few nights, and we head out to a Pizza Hut. And I think to myself, I'm not paying for Pizza Hut. I've always been a bit tight, but back as a teenager, I was really tight. I wouldn't spend money too easily on like food. Quite happily blow it on booze, but not on food. And I take one bite of a slice that Alex offers me and decide that I can't eat the rest. It literally tastes of oil and salt. That was the first and last time I've ever eaten anchovies, and I don't plan on ever doing it again. The rest of the night was kind of uneventful, and we went home and like I think I crashed on Alex's floor or something. We woke up the next morning and it was already kind of sort of 10, 11 o'clock by the time we went into the kitchen. I can't remember if Alex made us wait in his room for him to basically make sure that no one was coming, or if we just happened to leave that late anyway. I can't really remember that kind of detail, but I remember it was late morning. And we go into the kitchen and there is a breakfast bar there. Now, I've mentioned already some things which are quite outlandish, and I expect there to be a little bit of skepticism sometimes when you're talking about like this nice sort of middle class scrawny teenager. You don't expect drug dealers, pimps and prostitutes to be their living companions. But see, we go out to this breakfast bar and it is kind of nice. It's kind of swanky. There was like neon lights going all up the walls, and there was a nice little fish tank at one end of the breakfast bar. Nothing too grandiose, kind of a small one, but it's got some nice looking fish in it. And now I sit down at this breakfast bar and I'm chatting with Alex, who's getting himself like a cup of coffee, or probably getting me a cup of coffee or whatever. And I put my hands on the breakfast bar and I notice that there's like a sticky residue. And I look down at it and it kind of looks like a paste, like a dried paste. It's at this point that I ask Alex if he knows what's going on, and he says no, it's probably cocaine and it's gotten wet. And I didn't really know whether or not to believe him on this. Take it with a pinch of salt. It may or may not be the thing that he's saying, basically. Like, it's kind of like Schrodinger's cocaine. I don't know what to believe. I'm just going to go along with it, but also not. Now, it's at this point that I look to the left of myself, and there's the fish tank on the other side, and I see something kind of flaky, and I just don't even think about it. I think probably a bit of fish food. I pick it up and drop it in, and then realise actually that felt a bit chunky for fish food. It kind of felt like weed. And then I realise, oh wait, Alex, I think I just fed the fish weed. And he was like, you're joking. I mean, that's not my fish anyway. That's this guy's fish, so I don't care. Come to think of it, that is probably coated in the same cocaine that's on the side. And so I'm like, oh, I thought you were just kind of joking about the cocaine thing. And he's like, no, that actually is probably cocaine that's on the side there. I was like, right. I was like, why is it just like left here? It's like probably a party or something last night, you know. Estrella just comes in, she dumps everything everywhere. She's not particularly tidy. Later on, I get a phone call from Alex about a week later saying that not long after I left, the fish had all died and so I probably killed them. But then Alex followed this up by saying that the fish probably died quite happy. He had a dark sense of humour. After we had our coffees, we then go out for the day. Now, growing up with the circus, London was never exactly a touristy kind of place for me. It was always a place that was like, yeah, it was big. You'd probably get like 3 or 4 sort of grounds out of a typical sort of circuit. But generally speaking, it is a place where people go to work. And I knew that some people went there for tourism, but it was never something that I did. The first time that I started to see London really as a touristy place wasn't until I went there on a trip with my wife in 2013. But some 5 years earlier, me and Alex did go around and do a bunch of the touristy stuff ourselves. So I think Alex was just trying to keep me entertained or you know, just do fun stuff now that like a friend of his had come up to visit him. And so we went out for the day and we didn't really have a plan. I think the biggest plan we had that never ended up happening was we were going to go and try and find some mushrooms. And Alex wanted to take me to, I think it might be the Natural History Museum, but it could be the Science Museum. There's a bit where you're going up an escalator and you're going through the inside of like a globe. We had this whole thing planned where we were going to take some mushrooms into the building and then quickly eat them before going on the escalator. I remember that was a plan and it never ended up happening because we never found anyone to sell us mushrooms. But Alex insisted that if you walk around sort of Green Park and Hyde Park enough, you will eventually find people sort of, in his words, hanging out of the bushes, willing to sell you anything. Like he got an Oyster card from one of these guys. Like I think with Oyster cards, it's not even that hard to get one really. You can just sort of sign up to it, and I think you have to put in a bunch of details, probably including an address. But Alex managed to get one just sort of from a guy in a park, supposedly. This was also before you could use like your debit card or credit card to go through sort of like the London Underground, which is really the only effective way to get around London. So what Alex was doing was effectively giving me the Oyster card and then pushing in behind me as I was going through the barriers because he knew like how quick you had to be. And so for a while we were sort of sneaking around paying for one person with an Oyster card that he had like traded some games console or something for. It wasn't even like he'd used money. Like the way he put it was you could buy most things off these guys and they would also like buy most things off of you. And we gave it the name crack converters, like play on word of cash converters, because you could literally get like a DVD player, a PS2, drugs, Oyster cards, mobile phones, anything you wanted really that was like able to be handled. So we never ended up getting the mushrooms, but we did end up going into a museum, and then I think we promptly left again when we realised, nah, hang on, we haven't really got any like actual plan to be here, and we got other stuff we want to do, or at least that's how he was sort of seeing things. So we got in and literally sort of walked back out. I remember at some point we ended up in some like smaller science museum, which was more like a library. It was very quiet, people studying, and then there was just like a load of weird stuff in jars, and we just looked at the stuff in jars and then left. And then from there we went to Embankment. Now this is the first time in my life that I ever saw London in any way that kind of made me think, oh, this is a fun day out. Like I say, been to these other places like museums and such with school trips and all that, which is probably the reason why we left so quickly, is because if you've been through the schooling system in the southeast of England, chances are you've seen the Natural History Museum a few times. These days, couldn't get me to walk through there quickly enough. Like, I want to read every single thing, even if I've read it like the last time, because I promptly forget it the second I leave. But back then we were just sort of in this mindset of like, let's go and do something crazy. And by something crazy, I mean go on the London Eye. Wow, what a really dull half hour that was. Like, London is best viewed from the ground. That's what I realised. You see these sort of big buildings And they're really good to look sort of up at from sort of a distance, but still kind of up. When you look at it from above, from the London Eye, you just realise how flat the city is. Same thing kind of goes for the Eiffel Tower. The best part of the like scenery of Paris is seeing the Eiffel Tower sort of majestically standing on top of everything. When you're on the Eiffel Tower itself, that's the one thing you can't see. So we go on the London Eye, and then after we come off, we just sort of have a look around for what we're doing next. And this is when we notice there is something kind of light and loud happening nearby. And we wander over to it, and we see all these kids running between these pillars. And these pillars have got like lights going up them, and there's speakers on the side of these pillars. And it's this really weird kind of trippy thing going on. Now, I just kind of wanted to walk around it. And it turns out you were allowed to walk around it. In fact, the public were invited to walk around it. This art piece that we ended up going to see that day is called Volume. It was essentially an art installation that used motion sensors to trigger sound and light to create a sense of ambience around you as you walked through it. And it was the kind of thing that I just never even considered. Like, I never saw myself as an artistic or even creative person, apart from maybe like some of the songs that I was writing. But this made me look at art in a completely different way, and it would end up inspiring me to go on the digital music and sound arts course later on. Just a chance happening while out with Alex, looking to just get up to mischief in London, ended up putting me on a trajectory for like a whole different way of viewing art. And then we walk along Embankment, and it's just entertainment everywhere. It's probably one of my favourite parts of London. You're just sort of going from one place to another, and you've got all these different street performers, mimes, human statues that sort of come alive and follow you down the street or whatever. Really like cool, quirky little place. And from here, we duck into like a sushi place. Now, I'd never eaten sushi at this point, but Alex insisted that it was like something that I'd probably like. So we went in, we sat down. It's the kind of sushi place, I don't know which one it is now. I have a feeling it might be Yo Sushi, but I can't really remember. And it had a conveyor belt system going on. So you just pick up the plates, not have sushi on them, or whatever. It might not be sushi, it might be other things. And you pay according to the colour of the plate, sort of thing, and then it just gets added up. We sit down, and Alex starts selecting stuff and putting it down in front of me. I don't even know, and he's like, just trust me on this. And it was one of the few times where like me and Alex followed each other around, but we never really had like an established sense of who was leading who. We just sort of floated around. But sometimes you get these moments where one of us would take charge. And when we were walking around in London this day, and we went from the museum to the London Eye to the art exhibit thing to the sushi place, Alex was really taking charge, and he's putting down all of these sushi in front of me, and he said, just trust me, try each one of these things. Some of it I'm iffy about, but I still eat it anyway. Like the salmon, there was some like salmon skin stuff. It was alright. Some stuff that's got prawn on it. It was alright. There was this one thing I really liked, and he's like, oh, that's eel. I'm like, oh, okay. Turns out I like eel. Haven't eaten eel ever since, but turns out I was really into it. And actually, I just quite liked the rice, and I was eating like just bowls of rice. But then he got us for the table a sort of large flagon of sake. I love sake. That's what I've learned, especially hot sake. That's also what Alex sort of introduced me to that day. So he introduced me to sushi, he introduced me to like sound art inadvertently, but in particular he introduced me to hot sake. Yeah, the hotter the better. I'm one of these people that likes it. There's like different bands of what you can call them, depending on how long you keep it in heat for and how hot the sake is allowed to get. I like it at the highest band. I'm getting off track. Yeah, it was such a lovely like experience just trying all these foods, and I actually felt genuinely satisfied, especially as I'd barely eaten anything since arriving in London. I could hardly eat the pizza from last night because of the weird anchovies that Alex decided to cover the thing in, but this was actually magnificent. And then right behind Alex there is a massive TV that's just playing Ice Age, and I can barely hear it, but I'm just sat there with my hot sake on a beautiful sunny day watching Ice Age. It's definitely one of the more chill experiences I'd had in London up until this point. At this point in our friendship, I had hardly met any of Alex's family. I had met his mum, his stepdad, and his brother and sister. And he told me about his dad, and from the stories that he told me about his dad, who was this guy from Alabama who was a bit of a drifter, a bit of a chancer. He was, according to Alex, supposedly drafted for the Vietnam War, but then he pretended to be like mentally unstable and convinced the army to let him go due to being mentally unstable and not to be trusted with like a gun, effectively. Again, this is all stories Alex has told me, hard to know what's what. At some point after we left school, Alex actually went to live in Alabama. And I assumed he had gone to see his dad, or gone to live with his dad, but it turns out he had gone to live with his grandmother. So I didn't expect to meet Alex's dad at any point soon. I especially didn't expect for him to be living in London. So in the afternoon, full on sushi and sake, me and Alex get up and we leave, and Alex says, oh, we're going to head to Notting Hill for a bit, I'm just going to go to my dad's. And I'm like, your dad? He's like, yeah, he lives in Notting Hill. I'd never even been to Notting Hill, I didn't know what it looked like. We got there, it actually looked kind of a cool place. I kind of agreed with the vibe of the place. It looked kind of nice. And he takes me into this sort of like door between two shops, and we go up a set of stairs and we knock on the door, and this guy answers, and he has like some of the features of Alex but not quite, and a very thick American accent. And we walk into this place and there is art everywhere. Like, it's just a very kind of colourful flat. I remember it having like a really sort of lush looking carpet and sort of drapes everywhere and paintings about the place. And I asked about the paintings, I think, and either Alex or his dad told me that he was an art dealer. So that's when I clocked, oh, that's how he's affording to live in Notting Hill. And he's watching Coronation Street. Now, this was really alien to me because Alabama is a whole other culture that I don't know. And then there's Coronation Street, which is a whole culture I do know, but is still somehow equally alien to me. Very much Southern English in like my mental state. And so the North is like a whole place where people just sort of wander into each other's houses and like ask for cups of sugar and stuff. And yeah, it's like really strange to me. What I did not expect was that this guy from Alabama was not only going to be watching Coronation Street, but then starts telling me about how he watches every single episode and how he loves the show and he wishes there was something like it in the US. He was really like going on about how much he loved Coronation Street. Anyway, him and Alex have a conversation for a bit. I watch a bit of Coronation Street with him, and then we leave. We start making our way back to his flat via the underground. By this point, it's starting to get a little bit dark, and for some reason or another, we ended up in like the south. I think we got on the wrong tube line or something, or some mistake had happened. We'd ended up at a station we weren't meant to end up at, and we didn't realise until we were on the street level after leaving the station. At which point, we turned around and tried to walk back in. Now, in all of these videos, there is something I have yet to mention about Alex, and the reason why I haven't talked about it is because to this day, I still don't know how he did this. Going back to that first episode, I pointed out how when Alex first arrived in Halsham, in our school, he was this scrawny little middle class guy who was very socially awkward and always seemed to have this habit of putting his foot in it. He never stopped having the habit of putting his foot in it, by the way. But over the years, very quickly, he did learn some things about how to get away with things, how to get out of trouble, how to avoid upsetting people like on the street. One case that I will talk about before I go back to the story in London, for example, we were walking through the streets of Halsham one night. It was some point after I'd left school, but Alex was still around. And we're walking through the streets of Halsham, which at some places around Halsham could be quite rough. And Halsham had a really bad problem when I was growing up with like just basically the chav population. There were some really violent kids who were just looking for a scrap wherever you went. And it was kind of like everyone had different tactics as to how to avoid getting into a scrap. My tactic, for example, was kind of acknowledging them. Like if I showed them I acknowledged that they were there and I just sort of greeted them in a very kind of casual way, it sort of would diffuse a situation. Alex didn't have this tactic. He had something else completely, which usually only kicked in after someone started to chase him. Sooner or later, they'd catch up with him and you'd think, oh God, it's all going to kick off. This happened one time in Halsham. Me, Nick and Alex walking through the streets of Halsham. Nick was really ill-equipped for dealing with these kind of people. I'd seen him get into all kinds of trouble with just like random people that you came across on the streets of Halsham. But we see Alex behind us. He's got caught up with. Me and Nick have ran ahead. And we turn around and Alex is chatting to them. And then he starts to like act in a very kind of like big movements. Animated. He started acting this really animated way. Dancing and sort of joking and talking very loudly. And then I see these other guys laughing. And then Alex just sort of walks off and catches up with us. And me and Nick are completely baffled as to how he's done this. But he had this habit of like when people were coming for him, he could just turn the situation around and befriend them. Even if they came at him with like a sense of animosity. So going back to the story where we realise we're in like the wrong part of London and we only realise when we get out of the station, we've done that thing that we've been doing all day where I tap the Oyster card and Alex bundles in behind me. This guy sees it. Train station staff sees it. This guy should have got a bloody raise. Suddenly, we're on the street level, walking out of the station, and we hear behind us this booming New York accent. We turn around and we look at this huge, I mean, he must have been like 2 meters tall, muscly, black guy with a deep, like American accent. It sounded like Rocky Balboa to me, honestly. I know like the guy's meant to be from Philadelphia, Sylvester Stallone, but like proper low New York accent. I can't even do this accent. And he's shouting like, stop, get back here, that kind of stuff. And we start to run, but before we start to run, we kind of clock him. The guy runs and leaps over the barrier. These barriers aren't short. They're like, what are they? Like sort of 150 centimeters tall. You know, they're like up here. He just jumps over the whole thing like hurdles and chases us down, and in seconds he is on top of me and Alex, and he basically gets Alex on the shoulder, just like nothing too rough because, you know, like it's UK, we're quite careful about things like this. Just taps him on the shoulder effectively, saying like, stop, I've already seen you, kind of thing. And I'm thinking, oh God, that's it. We're going to get fined, or Alex is going to get fined at the very least. I can probably still get out of here if I'm quick. I wasn't exactly the most loyal guy, especially when a fine was going to happen. Like, what benefit is there in 2 people getting fined if one person can. I'll pay for half of Alex's even. But I just turn around and Alex starts to just play up to the guy and starts chatting to him. And again, much like he did with the chaps in Helsham, I see him start dancing. I see him start acting like an idiot, actually, because now I can hear what he's saying, and he is just talking utter shite. I can't even remember what it was, but it was like he was making up stuff. I think he was pretending to be unhinged or drunk or something. Like, he just completely negated any sort of professionalism that this guy had. And the guy just starts laughing with him, and then he gets chatting with us about, look, you can't go back through the barrier, you're gonna have to make your way back home some other way, but you're free to go. And I don't know to this day how Alex did it. I still don't know. He would just have this way where anyone who was coming at him for any reason, be it someone trying to beat him up, trying to get him in trouble, trying to take him in or give him a fine or whatever, it didn't always work. But there were a good couple of occasions where I was out of him and it would just turn. And it was like witchcraft. It was like magic. I didn't understand what was going on. I would see it and still not believe what I was seeing. I don't know if he carried on doing this like later in life, like when he lived in America. But if people who watched this knew Alex from his time in America, let me know if he still did this. Because I could never understand what it was he did. Like, he would just play up to people and make himself seem like the least threatening person ever. And they would just forgive him any trespass. And that would be it. After that, we had to walk back, I think. I think we ended up walking back and we got in quite late. We went into his flat. And I think Estrella was in at this point. And he said some things to her, but he basically said to me, don't come into the common area, just go straight to my bedroom. So I did. He went and spoke to Estrella for a bit and then came and joined me. And I asked him what was up, and he said no. Basically, he was asking Estrella not to rat him out for still being there, and trying to convince her all the time that he was just looking for a place to get his stuff to. And then I think he may have said that I was there to move some of his stuff, which, like I said earlier, I don't know if I ended up doing this or not, or if he was just bullshitting everybody. I wouldn't put it past him. Anyway, after we're in his room, Alex pulls out, like, I think a laptop or something, and he opens up like the disc player in it, puts a DVD in it, and says, come sit here, I want to watch this movie. And the movie is a film called Into the Wild. I didn't know anything about it, but he tells me straight away, this is based on a true story, by the way. I was like, okay, fair enough. It's this very uplifting and harrowing experience at the same time about a guy who is from a very wealthy background, who wants to give up all of his worldly possessions and live in the wilds of America. And the guy literally drifts about between Canada, USA and Mexico over the course of his life. And he ends up dead at the end of it in a very horrific kind of way, where he tries to eat some like bad meat when he's starving in like Yukon or somewhere. It's really quite a harrowing ending to the film. And the main character, I forgot what his name was at the beginning of the film, but he goes by the name Alexander Supertramp. Alexander, I think, was the name he just picked up. I don't think that was his actual name. And Supertramp after the band, plus the fact that he was considering himself to be a super tramp. But Alex then tells me at this moment that he has never related to any film so hard as he does to this one. And that he wanted to be that guy. Which is really weird because, as I mentioned, like the way he dies in the film, like we literally watched this film where this guy dies horrifically. Like the last half an hour of it is very hard to watch. It feels like half an hour. It could be 10 minutes. But he tells me at length that he wants to to do the exact same thing, like to live the life that this guy lived, just drifting about in America. And if he ended up dying but being free, then that would be like ideal for him. At the time I didn't really think much of it, but sometimes I think about that film and I think about how Alex ended up in America, and it does feel very chilling in a kind of prophetic almost kind of way, or like he made it happen. Like I say, I thought nothing of it at the time, and you know, it was like, well, a lot of people compare themselves to their favorite TV characters or to some TV character or some movie character, right? He used to pull me up on it, Alex did. Like because I did it all the time to various different TV shows, I'd relate to someone and I'd say as much, and he'd say, oh, you always have to compare yourself to people that you see on TV, just watch the damn show. But here he was doing the same thing. The next morning I pack up my stuff and get it ready to go, and me and Alex go out for another sort of wander around. This time we don't go quite so far, we stay in the local vicinity. I think we popped into like a little sort of, I want to say like Turkish or Greek type restaurant, and I didn't really eat a lot there, but like that was just because I don't think I was particularly hungry. I just drank a lot of coffee, and we headed back after that. I think what happened next was I said my goodbyes and I left, and I don't remember, but he may have given me some bits to take back with me. And I think that's everything I have to say pretty much about my time in London with Alex. Really, it all happened over the course of one eventful day, and there was just a couple of little bits either side. But seeing this place that he was living in, seeing the conditions he was living in, and the way he was very sort of hush-hush about me being there and had to make up stuff, I do think that he probably was telling the truth, that he really was living with these people, and that he probably was in actually some kind of trouble. Now, I was not equipped to deal with or help him with at the time. Maybe I could have done more to convince him to just leave there and then. Alex was very willful and prideful, and if you tell him that he has to leave somewhere, he will dig in his heels and stay. If you tell him that he has to stay somewhere, he will pack his bags and get out of there. Maybe that's what the guy should have done. If he had known Alex better, he would have said, right, stay here as long as you like. Alex would have gone. Or maybe just not say anything at all, because I'm sure Alex would have preferred the idea of not running the risk of being attacked. So now I turn to you, the people who knew Alex. In a big way, you're kind of the people who I make this series for. Know if other people are interested, then that's great. I kind of make this series with the intention of showing to a lot of the people who knew Alex, and Alex knew a lot of people in his lifetime. People all across America, in the United Arab Emirates, in Germany, and across different parts of England. Alex knew a lot of people and made contact with a lot of people, and probably made quite an impression on a lot of people. And I made these videos almost as a way to introduce a different side of Alex to people who knew him. I myself would like to know your version of Alex, your experiences with him and what he was like when he was around you. So I made this series not with the intention of just keeping it to myself, but now that I've completed the main bulk of my stories, I want to ask other people who knew Alex to make their own videos containing stories of the experiences and times that they spent with the guy. And when they do, when you do, hopefully, reach out to me in maybe the comments of this video and, you know, tag, oh, you've made this video or whatever, or just comment that you've made one, and I'll add it to this playlist, which is public, and together we can piece together like all of the different aspects and time periods of Alex's life and really get to know him that little bit better. If this is something you're interested in, then please let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, feel free to comment on anything else that has come up in this video, or just any other sort of questions that you might have about my time around this really interesting character. Feel free to like the video, and if you're so inclined and you sort of look around the rest of my channel and think, you know, there's some other things that you like, then please do subscribe. But as I say, this will probably be the last episode of the Chronicles of Alex from me, unless of course I manage to collate together enough sort of fragments of stories to make a whole video. But until I hear from you again, and until next time, have a good one.